this is Henrik. I hope you are doing well and that you are hungry for some inspiring, thought-provoking, and hopefully perspective-expanding radio. We have invited Barbara Clow to the program. She is the author of The Mind Chronicles, a visionary guide into past lives, The Mayan Code, Time Acceleration and Awakening the World Mind, Chiron, Rainbow Bridge between the inner and outer planets, the Pleiadian Agenda, a new cosmology for the Age of Light, Catastrophobia, the truth behind Earth changes in the coming Age of Light, to name just a few of her titles. Her most recent book is called Alchemy of 9 Dimensions, and this is primarily what we are going to focus on here today. She teaches classes with her partner and co-author Gerald Clow, and if you want to find out more, the website is handclow2012.com. Again, that's the place to go to see and read more about Barbara, her books, CDs, and DVDs. And I read Alchemy of 9 Dimensions back in 2005, I think it was, the first edition. Now it's available in a revised and expanded edition, and I've been interested in her work on catastrophobia as well, and I wanted to have her on the program for quite some time, so this is going to be a lot of fun for me as well. Barbara, welcome to Red Eyes Radio. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Henrik. Hi.
It's excellent to have you here. I mean, you've done an incredible amount of work over the years. You've been writing on so many different topics. And if we do have someone in our audience here today that never have heard about you or your work, what do you think would be kind of worth mentioning as in terms of background of yourself, Barbara?
Well, I've been a consciousness researcher for about 35 years at this point, and I also was raised in an indigenous context. My grandfather is Cherokee, and so I grew up very, very early with kind of a multi-dimensional level of consciousness. And then in terms of my career, I ended up being fortunate enough to be a publisher for 20 years, where I worked for Bear & Company. And so I've had a very, very rich and varied career. I've been teaching a lot and working in publishing and raising a family with 4 kids. And so I kind of have a very kind of holistic perspective, I guess is the best thing to say.
Mm-hmm. And again, you have done so much work, and I'm fascinated myself about catastrophobia, and maybe a little bit later in the program, in the second segment, we can talk about that. But again, as I mentioned in the introduction, your latest edition now then is called Alchemy of 9 Dimensions, and this is a new revised editions. Maybe you can just tell us a little bit about some of the additions and some of the things that you've expanded on in this new version.
Yeah, what happened with Alchemy of 9 Dimensions is when it went to press in 2004, I still did not have all of the scientific information on the 9th dimension. Now, Alchemy of 9 Dimensions is working with 9 dimensions of consciousness, which each one of us is able to access. And I went to press finally in 2004 because the information was so important, but I was very much aware that I didn't fully have the 9th dimension in yet, the scientific level. And so then the next thing that happened, as things go, is in 2005, I discovered the research of Carl Johann Kalaman,
yes,
whom I know your listeners are very familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And Carl Johann Kalaman's theory of time acceleration in the Mayan calendar was the missing piece of Alchemy of 9 Dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to know Carl. I ended up writing a book about his research called The Mayan Code. And then finally, after I got the Mayan Code done, I realized that I really needed to add this piece of information to Alchemy of 9 Dimensions. So fortunately, the publisher was agreeable. But when an author revises a book, it's usually just an absolute mess because they ended up changing almost every sentence because you've grown so much since you wrote a book.
Of course.
And so 2 things happened that really amazed me. First of all, 90% of the book was perfect, and that really shocked me because I'm very dyslexic and I've had an extremely hard time learning how to be a writer. And I just couldn't believe that the book was so beautifully polished. But the one piece that was not right in the book, besides the addition of Carl Kalaman's theory in the 9th chapter, the other thing that was not completely clear in the book were issues around the 4th dimension. And the fourth dimension has to do with the dark and the light and the global elite and God control and all of those complex issues that we all struggle with. And I realized when I was working on the book that back in 2004, I was still not totally clear about that dimension. So I did some revisions in the fourth chapter and cleared up the issue of the collective mind. The fourth dimension rules the collective mind. And the fourth dimension is also a dimension that we access by means of our feelings. And then once we start to go into our feeling body, then we have access to the higher dimensions, the fifth through the ninth dimension. So those higher dimensions come into the fourth dimension, and that's where we receive them. We receive them by intuition and feelings, and then finally our minds are able to access what's going on. But what was going on back in 2004 for me is I still had not figured it out. So I polished the fourth dimension, and I'm happy to say at this point that I think it's really perfect, and I think it's an extremely clear and accurate description of how we are working with the collective mind and how we're manipulated in that dimension. And I'm very happy about this because I'd say that maybe is the most important issue for all of us, is to get clear in that dimension. So that's what happens with it.
There you go. The global elite, a very important topic, obviously, as you say, and that I do kind of want to take our listeners, I guess, through some of the dimensions and go back to the fourth one, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the global elite a little bit later. Then, but if you would, can you give us a little bit of an outline of a journey, so to speak, through these nine dimensions, and comment on why nine as well, of course.
Yeah. Let me identify them and also give us a sense of what we get out of being able to work with them. Now, this system of dimensionality came to me from the Pleiadians back in 1995. And I wrote a book called The Pleiadian Agenda, which is a channel book. And it's a channel book that describes these nine dimensions. So they came first to me from another dimension, and then I spent 14 or 15 years teaching them and also writing Alchemy of Nine Dimensions, attempting to elucidate more about what these dimensions were about. But I think we need to start by saying that this information was received in a channeled state, and when it came to me, I found many, many things about it that didn't make sense, contradicted current science, and I had real problems with. Mm-hmm. But what I did in the Pleiadian Agenda was I just simply wrote down what they said, whether I thought whatever I thought about it. And so let me give you those nine dimensions and give you a sense of how they benefit us. And then, of course, what happens with alchemy is alchemy fleshes it out. In other words, the first book received it, and the second book fleshed it out. So according to the Pleiadians, there are nine dimensions that all humans are able to access, and not only able to access, but the Pleiadians also said that regardless of what anybody is doing on our planet Earth, they said at the end of the Mayan calendar, which back in those days I thought of as 2012. Now I think of it as 2011 because I'm in agreement with Carl Kalaman. Okay. So what they said was at the end of the Mayan calendar, all nine dimensions would open on this planet, and it doesn't matter what anybody is doing. All of a sudden, they're going to have nine dimensions of consciousness instead of three dimensions. So what the Pleiadians said is the first dimension is the center of the Earth, which is an iron core crystal. The second dimension is the realm between the iron core crystal and the surface of the planet. So it's like the telluric realm, the rocks and minerals below the crust of the planet. The third dimension is linear space and time on the surface of the planet, which is the dimension that we inhabit, of course. The fourth dimension is the collective mind, and that dimension comes from the thoughts